Welcome back, everyone. Dylan here from All You Can Board, and I am back with another look at a brand new hero pack that was just announced for Marvel Champions. This time it is the most dangerous woman in the galaxy, that is Gamora, another member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, Thanos' daughter. This is a really exciting one. It's an aggression hero, and selfishly, I'm really excited about it because aggression is my favorite aspect to play with. But there's some really interesting things that are coming in this hero pack that we haven't seen before, or haven't seen to this done in this way or to this extent before. So first of all, Gamora is going to be allowed to have up to 6 aspect cards that are not aggression included in her deck, as long as that they are attack or thwart events. Which means that if you are a fan of deck building, if you're a fan of crafting different decks to take on different villains and just getting as creative as possible, you're gonna have a whole bunch of possibilities here, because when you're not restricted to one aspect, there are a whole bunch of combos that can come into play, even if it's only 6 cards. We saw this first with Spider-Woman being allowed to have 2 different aspects. The fact that this can now extend beyond to all the aspects, even if it is only attack and thwart events, is a pretty big deal, and it's going to open up a lot of really cool possibilities. So I'm really excited about that. And on top of that, the entire theme of Gamora is that she utilizes attack and thwart events, and that usually using one will somewhat benefit you in the other one as well. So if you do an attack event, you'll somehow get some thwart out of it as well. That comes into play with her basic hero abilities, as you'll see. But overall, Gamora is looking really cool. And the other really cool thing to keep in mind is that this hero is scheduled, according to Fantasy Flight, to come out in May, which is the same month that Star-Lord is coming out. So that means we're going to be getting 2 hero packs in May, 2 new Guardians of the Galaxy heroes and members, which means that we still don't know what's coming out in June or July and after that fact, but I think we can probably expect that Drax will follow, because he's the only member of the team that we see in the movies that isn't currently represented. So I would imagine that's coming as well. Overall, very cool, lots to be excited about. So let's jump in. I'm gonna look at every single new card that was revealed and give my initial thoughts on what I think of them. Okay, first up, let's start with, of course, the hero card, which is Gamora. 2 thwart, 2 attack, 2 defense, a hand size of 5, so a pretty small hand size, and hit points of 10, which is also kind of on the small size. So I think that you're going to be having to balance all these different attack and thwart capabilities that she has with the fact that she's going to be a little bit squishy. Her ability is Finesse. Response after you play an attack event, remove 1 threat from a scheme, which is limited to once per phase. And Precision is the reverse of that. Response after you play thwart event, deal 1 damage to an enemy. So the point here being that you're going to be doing a ton of attack and thwart events with Gamora, and every time you do, you're going to benefit from being able to ping a minion or the villain itself, or remove 1 threat from one of the schemes in play. So you're going to be doing a lot of that. Probably going to be doing both of these every turn is your goal, because and it shouldn't be too hard given how many we're seeing that there are cards that are specifically attack and thwart events now combined. So 1 card triggers both of them. So I think you'll be triggering both of these pretty often on your turn, which is just nice to always be able to remove an additional threat and always be able to ping 1 damage to one of your enemies, especially if you're removing status cards with that 1 damage. I think that's a big deal. So very cool. Overall, especially with the 2s across the board, I think this is a pretty solid base hero. I'm excited to use it. The only thing I'm worried about, again, is the hand size and hit points being pretty low. I think it makes sense to offset the power level that we're seeing so far, but it's going to be something to keep in mind, especially if you're playing solo. True solo, this is going to be a squishy hero that you're going to have to find other ways to protect. Okay, so moving on to the Alter-Ego form, which is also Gamora, the outlaw version of Gamora instead of Guardian. Her ability, like I alluded to in the intro, is Skilled Tactician. This is the biggest thing about Gamora. You may include up to 6 attack and or thwart events in your deck that are not your chosen aspect. So whatever you choose your main aspect to be, she comes as aggression, but if you build her as a justice hero, the other 3 aspects, you can then take 6 attack or thwart events and add them into your deck as part of the deck building process. So again, just from a pure deck building standpoint, if that is something that you really strive for, or love about Marvel Champions, is the deck building aspect, there's not going to really be many better options besides maybe Spider-Woman in terms of deck building heroes. Spider-Woman is limited to 2 aspects. Yes, there's only 6 cards, and they're specifically attack or thwart events that you're allowed to include here, but because you're going from all other aspects, there's just so many combo possibilities, so many things to try, so many tweaks you can do where you remove 1 and add 1 from another aspect in. I think you're going to have a lot of fun just trying different things out with Gamora in different situations and just seeing how it works. The other action is also really good. Look at the top card of your deck, and if that card is an attack or thwart event, draw it. So you get to peek at the top card of your deck baseline just to see what it is. But then on top of that, if it is an attack or thwart event, which you're going to have a lot of in Gamora's decks, you get to draw it. So it could be a free card draw every time you're in Alter Ego form. Overall, it's a very, very solid Alter Ego. The recovery is standard at 3, hand size is 6, and hit points are 10, which we've already talked about. Overall, those are generally a little bit lower than we'd like to see, but because of the power level and I think what she's bringing to the table, it makes sense, and it's something you're going to have to balance. It's really going to be more of an issue in solo play. It's the same issue I ran into with Hawkeye. I love playing Hawkeye, but I found it to be really squishy in true solo. I think Gamora is going to have that same problem, but again, you just build your deck to try to compensate for that. So overall, very cool Alter Ego form, and again, the deck building itself is just, that's the reason to come to the table for Gamora in the first place, especially if you love deck building. Okay, so next up we have Keen Instincts, which is one of the hero-specific cards for Gamora. 1 cost, upgrade, resource, exhaust Keen Instincts, generate a wild resource for an attack or thwart event. Solid card all around. It's a super low cost at 1. If you can get this out early on, and especially on your first turn, you're just setting yourself up for so much potential because again, Gamora is so much built around attack and thwart events. Not only with her, like the cards that are coming in her deck and how you're building it, but also in how her hero card benefits off of those being played. Generating a wild resource for them for a single cost of 1 and having that in play permanently is very, very good value. So there's not much to say about this card other than the fact that it's very good, and for what Gamora is trying to do, it's essential to try to get this out. This is part of your kit, and you're going to want to try to get this out as early as possible. Next up on the hero-specific cards, we have Decisive Blow, another solid card, 2-cost event. It's an attack action, deal 4 damage to an enemy, and it's 7 instead if you have played a thwart event this turn. So at 2 cost, you're going to probably, generally you're trying to play at least 2 cards a turn. You're going to have thwart events, you're going to have cards that are thwart and attack events. It's not going to be very hard to have played a thwart event before this. It's just going to be a matter of, you want to get this into a hand where you have a thwart event, and those are the 2 things you're looking to accomplish that turn. So it's not a super tough condition to meet to be able to do 7 damage for 2 cost. Again, comparing it to like something like Swinging Web Kick, which is 3 cost for 8 damage. That's really, really good value. Even the base cost of 4 damage to an enemy, you're not going to feel too bad when you have to do the 4 damage version of this if you couldn't play a thwart event before that. Dealing 4 damage can be super helpful. Again, there's cards like Haymaker that this is already better than. So it's still good, but you're going to be one to try to achieve the 7 damage, obviously. I don't think it's going to be too difficult. I think this is going to end up being a really key card in the deck and one that you're using for some of your main aggressive swings that you're doing with Gamora. Okay, next up we have Crosscounter, which is a super cool event card. It's a 1-cost event, and it is it's an attack, a defense, and a thwart event. So it covers all 3, the attack and thwart obviously being the 2 keys there because they both trigger Gamora's main hero abilities. So this is a hero interrupt that's an attack, defense, and thwart. When you would take any amount of damage, prevent 3 of that damage, deal 1 damage to an enemy, and remove 1 threat from a scheme. So you're obviously using this when you're taking damage on mostly on the villain's turn. If you haven't triggered your hero abilities yet, because they are once per phase on the hero card, this is going to do a whole bunch. So it's going to prevent 3 of that damage. It's going to deal 1 damage to an enemy, and then potentially deal another 1 damage if you haven't used the hero ability yet, and then remove 1 threat from a scheme, potentially remove another threat from a scheme, again, if you haven't used the hero ability. So this opens up a ton of possibilities, and if you didn't trigger things on your turn, or you wanted to specifically save them for this turn for some reason, or the villain's turn for some reason, you can get a whole lot of value here. But even without the hero abilities being triggered, this is just really good value for one cost. 1 cost to prevent 3 damage and also remove a threat, and also ping 1 damage to a minion or a villain is a really, really good card. So I think this is going to see a lot of use, and it adds to the fact that because Gamora is squishy and because you're going to be worried about your health a little bit, having this card in your back pocket and being able to use it for only 1 cost and do other things with it, that versatility is going to be really, really important. So all around, I think it's a super solid card. Okay, next up we have Impede, and this is one of the ones I'm most excited having seen because I think the power level is just so high. It's a 2-cost event. Hero action is thwart, remove 3 threat from the main scheme. If this is the first card you have played this round, return this card to your hand. The fact that this is a Justice card, and I'm already thinking about all the possibilities of other Justice heroes that this can play into, having this be the first card that you play in a round, it's not always super easy, but I would say generally you can plan to have that happen anytime you want. If there's some reason this has to be played after the fact, it's still 2 costs to remove 3 threat, which isn't honestly that bad. It's only from the main scheme, keep that in mind. So if you're playing against a villain that has a lot of side schemes, this is going to limit you, and you might want to think about that when you're building your deck. But generally, if it's the main scheme that you're trying to focus on, that's where your attention needs to go with the villain you're playing against. 2 costs for 3 threat removal is pretty good baseline as it is. The fact that you can get this card back and potentially continue to get it back over and over and over again is just awesome. I don't think this is broken by any means. I don't think this is necessarily like the best Justice card, but I think that it's going to see a lot of use beyond Gamora, and I can already imagine the amount of deck building possibilities that this is going to end up in because of how easy the condition is to meet and how great it is to get a card back into your hand, even just to use it as a resource again. To use this as the first card in your turn, remove the 3 threat, get it back to your hand, and then use it as a resource to play another card is such great value. And it can't be understated how much of that is even useful. Like, not to think about having to use it like for its ability again, or keep it in your hand to remove more threat on a future turn. Just the fact that you're essentially getting that resource again that you can use is just really valuable. It essentially reduces the cost of this card when you think about it. So awesome card. Cannot wait to try out for myself. I think it's going to have a lot of use across multiple heroes in the game. Next up, we have a basic card, which is Hit and Run. The interesting thing here, so it's a 3-cost event. The interesting thing here is that it is an attack and thwart event, which for Gamora specifically, these are very, very valuable because this one card triggers both of her hero abilities. The hero action is attack thwart, deal 2 damage to an enemy, and also remove 2 threat from a scheme. So for 3 cost, dealing 2 damage or removing 2 threat is pretty I would say it's not great value, but the fact that it's doing both, the versatility is what you're really paying for here, the ability to do 2 things with a single card. Yes, you're paying more for it because of it, but there are ways to reduce the cost of the specific, well, most heroes have a way to reduce the cost of paying for a card, but Gamora specifically has the one to reduce attack thwart events. So that could be reducing this cost down to 2 for you, which is great value. And again, the attack and thwart on one card is super valuable for Gamora. So I think that in Gamora's deck, this is a great card. Beyond Gamora, I think the versatility still makes it something that we could see in other heroes being able to do 2 things with a single card, very valuable. But again, for that steep price, it might just not slot into other heroes' decks when you have to think about other cards are being pulled out because of it. You might just have better ways to remove threat and deal damage than needing to do it specifically on a single card. But again, on Gamora specifically, I'm really excited to try this out, and I think it's going to be a really good trigger for her hero abilities. Next up, we have a protection card, which is First Hit. Some great artwork on this one. It's a 1-cost event. It's a hero action attack, deal 2 damage to the villain. There's also a hero interrupt attack on the same card. When a minion initiates an attack, deal 2 damage to that minion. So 1 cost, deal 2 damage it's okay. It's not fantastic, but it's not bad either. The hero interrupt here is obviously the really cool one and the big one. So the fact that when a minion is initiating an attack, you can respond with this to potentially just kill it off with that 2 damage so that attack doesn't hit you is pretty good. Pretty good. So I'm not, it's not a card that blows me away. It's not one I'm super excited about, and not having played enough protection on my own to really understand all the nuances of protection deck building and to see where cards like this slot in, it's hard for me to say right off the top how excited I am for this card or where it slots into decks beyond Gamora potentially. But I would say that it is an attack event that adds a defensive capability. So that in and of itself, if you were trying to build it, not even build a protection Gamora deck, just having this be one of the 6 cards that Gamora adds into her deck would be pretty interesting because it triggers her hero ability. It's an attack event, which she wants to have a lot of, but it also is potentially dealing with minions that you couldn't deal with on your turn or didn't want to be able to accomplish other things to prevent damage that's coming into you. So I think overall, it's a pretty cool card. It's a pretty decent card. I just need to see this one in action more to really understand how good it is, or whether it just stays kind of just being okay, or whether it can actually cross that threshold and be one of the mainstays we see in protection decks. Overall, I'm intrigued and I can't wait to try it out. Next up, we have Plan of Attack, which is an aggression card with 0 cost. It's an event. Search the top 4 cards of your deck, and you do the top 7 cards instead if you are in Alter-Ego form for an attack event, and add that card to your hand, then shuffle your deck. So you're essentially cycling this card to be able to add a more valuable card to your hand, which is an attack card. It's also allowing you to choose specifically, especially if you go for 7. If you're in Alter-Ego form and are able to search 7, and especially if you're in a deck like Gamora where there's going to be tons of attack events, you're going to have your choice. It's not like you're just going to potentially only find 1. You might sometimes, but generally you're probably going to have a choice of a few different cards in that 7 to be able to pick from. So you're going to swap this card in your hand, essentially. Not swap because it's not going into your deck, but you know what I mean. You're basically putting this into the discard pile to be able to have your pick of a more valuable attack card that you can potentially use this turn. And if you don't find one that you can potentially use this turn, you might be able to just get a resource out of it, which leaves you in the same position you were in. So it's a pretty good card, especially in Gamora decks where you're having tons of different attack events that you're going to be wanting to get to be able to have huge swings in your turn and be able to deal a ton of damage if you are playing aggression. And if you're not playing aggression, if you're not playing aggression, I think this is even more interesting because you're going to have attack events, yes, still in Gamora, because you're taking them from other aspects, but this one allows you to specifically find and seek them out and find the ones you're looking for if you're not having them come up as frequently as if you were playing a full aggression deck. So overall, I think it's a pretty solid card. Beyond Gamora, I think it's still going to be pretty good. I just think that Gamora is going to see way more of a benefit by the fact that she has so many attack events. But if you're playing in another aggression character deck and you're looking for specific huge swing cards, I'm thinking even Wasp off the top of my head, where she has these really huge swing attack event cards that can really lead to these huge powerful turns that could potentially even end the game sometimes. Being able to spend 0 for this to basically cycle through and find that card you want, with the only caveat being you get to search more if you're in alter ego form, I think it's pretty good. It's not gonna, burn the house down with its power level, but I think that it's going to be a useful card that you will see used in different aggression decks, and in Gamora specifically will probably find its way into a deck even if you're not playing aggression. Okay, next up is probably the card that has me most intrigued out of all the cards we've seen. I don't know about most intrigued, but it's one I am most excited about, and I'm biased because I love new ally cards, and I figured that the ally in this deck would probably be Nebula, and it is, but it's a very, very cool ally. So 2 cost, 2 thwart, 2 attack, 2 health, 2s across the board. The response in this card, though, is that after Nebula enters play, search your deck for an attack or thwart event, add it to your hand, then shuffle your deck. I think that this is actually really powerful in Gamora because, again, everything about her is attack or thwart events, and you're going to be wanting different ones depending on what you're trying to accomplish. If you really need to remove some threat from the scheme, or if you're just looking to deal a whole bunch of damage, the fact that you get to play this ally for fairly low cost at 2, with the ability to thwart or attack for 2 that same turn, and then sign an attack or thwart event that you're probably going to be playing this turn, and then triggering your hero ability off of that card that you grabbed, this is a huge swing card, and I think there's gonna be a lot of potential here. And then obviously having the chump blocker left at 1 health to be able to protect yourself on the next villain turn. I think this is an awesome card. All around, I'm just super excited to be able to play with it and see what that power level ceiling is on it. The coolest thing about this card, so I'm going to jump into the next card directly off this, because I think one of the coolest things about this is the interaction it has with the Nemesis card in Gamora. And the Nemesis card is also Nebula. So I think, as far as I know, this is the first time we've seen that, where an ally in the deck and the Nemesis are one and the same. So the Nemesis is a 5 health Nemesis that has 1 scheme and 2 attack. Retaliate 2, but the coolest part about it is the forced interrupt. When this minion would enter play, you discard Nebula if you have that ally in play from play. So this counteracts Nebula being in play by basically just discarding to the, you can think of her switching sides. She leaves your side and goes to the villain side, which thematically is absolutely perfect. The way they nail thematics in Marvel Champions is just beyond me, but they do such a good job with it. And the fact that you can look at it as her switching sides, which is something Nebula has done, time and time again, is very, very cool. Overall, besides the aspect of removing your ally from play, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the most, worrying minion you're going to see hit play, or Nemesis that we've seen hit play. The Retaliate 2 is pretty nasty. You definitely have to keep that in mind with how you're trying to deal with her. And the 5 health is a lot to go through. And actually the attack at 2 it can be a pain. So I think it's going to be one that you want to get rid of quickly, but there's nothing here that's going to really, make you sweat when it hits play. Obviously, again, if it discards your ally, that really sucks. But again, you're probably already going to have, she only has 2 health for ally as Nebula, so you're probably already going to have used one of her abilities. She's going to be on the brink of dying anyway, so all you're really missing out there is potentially on a block or something. So overall, I think the interaction is really cool. I think that it's something I love when they do these new things we haven't seen before. And overall, the Nebula Ally and Nebula Nemesis have me really excited, and I'm really looking forward to trying both of them out. And finally, we have the side scheme for the Nemesis, which is, again, Nebula. It's a pretty nasty side scheme. So it's called Sibling Rivalry. Players other than Gamora cannot remove threat from this side scheme. So the only player who's going to be able to do that is Gamora. It's going to be her target specifically. The forced response on it is after the villain phase begins, deal 1 face down encounter card to Gamora. So that is pretty nasty. You don't want to be getting more encounter cards than you need. That happening every villain phase, an additional one, is pretty bad. There's 4 threat to remove in total. The only thing I will say is that, again, with Gamora being so focused on thwart and attack events, you're going to be, yes, if you use her pre-built aspect as her main aspect, you're going to be mostly focusing on doing damage, but because her hero ability reacts in a way where you're going to remove some threat, and because you're going to have other ways to remove threat by the thwart events you're putting into your deck, I think you're going to be able to deal with this fairly well. Obviously, if you're playing like a Justice build or something, it's going to be a lot easier to remove the 4 threat. It's not going to be the end of the world. It doesn't scale by player count because Gamora specifically is the one removing the threat here, so it's not like 4 per player. It's just 4 no matter how many players you're playing with. But again, Gamora is the one that specifically has to deal with this. But you're going to want to deal with it right away because you don't want to begin dealt extra encounter cards every single villain phase. So I think it's really cool though. And I like, even though they suck when you play against them, these tougher side schemes and Nemesis abilities, it gives more emphasis to your Nemesis and having to really overcome these challenges when they're a little tougher to deal with. So I like the Sibling rivalry ability here, and that it's going to be difficult to deal with. And I think that coupled with Nebula as a Nemesis is going to be really cool. So I'm really excited to see the other Nemesis cards. We have one of the names of them, which is in a bind, but the actual ability text is covered. So we're gonna have to wait to see what those are all about. But so far, the side scheme has me pretty excited. And those are all the cards for Gamora. I am super pumped about this hero, even just from the deck building aspects alone, being able to add in these other cards from the aspects. I'm already thinking about different combinations, and it's gonna be really cool to see the different decks that people come up with, because there's just gonna be so many possibilities by adding in these other aspect cards that you can bring in. Overall, I think the focus on attack and thwart events and having those benefit off of her hero powers and the other aspect cards you're bringing in is a really cool dynamic to Gamora and will make her really unique to play. The one other thing I will say that to keep in mind is that they have done a lot of mentioning of Thanos here. Now I know she is the daughter of Thanos, so it's hard to really create a description of this hero and bring her without that mention. But the way they've emphasized it and the way that we spent the first cycle of Marvel Champions focusing on the Avengers, and we're now focusing on the Guardians of the Galaxy, many of which have a connection directly to Thanos, which is Gamora, Drax, Nebula. I feel like we're building towards, after Galaxy's Most Wanted, the next expansion scenario pack being Thanos and bringing all the Avengers and Guardians together in this one. I don't want to say culmination because it's not like the game's going to end. It's going to go far beyond that. But I think that I could see where it's going. So that has me excited. I'm curious to see if they do more mentioning of Thanos specifically in the next hero pack, which I am expecting to be Drax. That's the only one we're missing at this point. I think that's a no-brainer. And I would imagine that's coming in June, or July, I guess, if we were doing 2 in May. But yeah, so anyways, I'm super excited about this. I'm excited that we're going to get Star-Lord and Gamora in the same month. May is going to be off the wall exciting because we're going to be coming off of the Galaxy's Most Wanted pack in April and then getting 2 brand new heroes in May. Let me know in the comments which cards have you most excited, what other cards that are unannounced you're hoping that or what types of cards you're hoping that we see for Gamora, and what ideas you have, especially like because of this adding in 6 aspect cards from other aspects into her deck. Let me know what combos you're already thinking about. If you played aggression, for instance, what other cards are you thinking about bringing in from justice and protection and leadership that you think are going to be great combos and build some really interesting decks? I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you when we get another hero mentioned, or when I get the Scarlet Witch hero pack, which should be in the next couple weeks. I will have a full review on that. Thanks for watching. See you next time.